I want to start playing some video here from liberals, and you're gonna hear them trying to talk about fascism, trying to talk about Donald Trump being a fascist, which Donald Trump is not a fascist. I mean, he may have appealed to bigotry against immigrants or Muslims. He may have been more of a Bonapartist than other sections of the ruling class, but he wasn't a fascist. But we're going to hear liberals talking about fascism, and we're going to see just how confused and out of touch their understanding of fascism really is. This is Rachel Maddow.
But one of the lessons that emerges quickly when you spend time looking at this history of the violent ultra-right, not just internationally, but here in the United States, one of the things that just comes home again and again is that fascist, violent, authoritarian messaging very, very, very often comes with a big heaping helping of anti-Semitism. People who want to throw a government by force, people who want to get rid of democratically elected leaders and instead install some leader using violence, whipping people up toward believing that there's no political solution, that there has to be violence instead, that there are enemies who have infiltrated the country, and so the whole thing needs to be burned down and cleansed and started over this time with us in charge. And that whole line of argument, that whole form of insidious messaging.
Hold up. Hold up. Hold up. First of all, Hitler took power democratically in an election. He was in a coalition with the right wing and was appointed chancellor. Mussolini took power in a coup, a military coup, the March on Rome, that had support from the highest levels of political power. Franco in Spain, he took power, in a civil war and was being supported by all the Western capitalist countries for the most part. Only the Soviet Union and Mexico came to the aid of Spain. Where has fascism come to power in some kind of revolt that burns down the entire country? Generally, that's not what happens. When we've seen countries move toward fascism, whether it was Spain or Germany or Italy, it hasn't been a big revolt that burns down the entire country. That's just not how it happens. Generally, fascists are brought to power by the political establishment as a response to continued unrest and instability. And what was that she said beforehand? Let's roll this back just a little bit. What was this she said beforehand?
Perennially targeted, scapegoated, and insinuated against by people who are making those kinds of arguments. It happens over and over again around the world.
What was this she said before?
Full cabal that's secretly in charge and pulling all the strings, and they need to be rooted out. Again and again and again, over time, and in lots of different countries, but including in ours, that is core to fascist and authoritarian messaging. And Jewish people are perennially targeted.
She said something before that.
Infiltrated the country, and so the whole thing needs to be burned down.
Yeah,
and
there we go. There we go. What did she say here? That
using violence, whipping people up toward believing that there's no political solution, that there has to be violence instead, that
there's no political solution and there has to be violence.
Enemies who have infiltrated the country, and so the whole thing needs to be burned down. And
there's enemies that have infiltrated the country, and the whole thing needs to be burned down.
Cleansed and started over this time with us in charge.
And the whole thing needs to be burned down and cleansed with the whole thing starting over with us in charge. Where have I heard that before? The country's been infiltrated. Infiltrated. Would that mean that like some other country meddled in the elections and there's a bunch of secret Nazis somewhere in the government? And so instead of trying to make the country better, we have to just burn it down and tear it down and burn it down. And the American flag is racist and the American flag is fascist. And anyone who waves the flag or want to make the country better needs to be beaten up and killed. And we'll burn it down and we'll tear it down and then we'll put us in charge. That doesn't sound like the message of any Donald Trump supporting organization. That sounds an awful lot like the message of the synthetic left to me. That sounds a lot like Antifa, right? The fascists generally go around claiming they're trying to restore the greatness of the past. They're going to make America great again. That's what the far right generally puts out, right? The far right is saying we want to restore the past. We want to glorify things. And it seems like it's the unhinged, nutty ultra left that generally put out the message that the country is irredeemable and must be burned down and destroyed and rebuilt with us in charge. Fascism and the far right generally appeal to making things the way they used to be. It's a reactionary conservative movement. But what she's promoting there, this message that she's putting out here, that there's people that want to burn down the entire country because it's quote unquote irredeemable, and then take it over themselves. That doesn't sound like fascism to me. That sounds like Antifa. That sounds like the synthetic left, right? And so I don't know what she's getting at there. All right, writing it down. Okay. Austrian and Portuguese fascism. So, I'm just not seeing how that's a fascist message. That sounds like an unhinged ultra leftist, new left, counterculture, anarchist, new left message to me. You're going to burn down the whole country and it's irredeemable, and you're going to take, and then once it's destroyed, you're going to be in charge. I don't hear fascists ever saying that. I don't even hear genuine communists and Marxists talking that way. That sounds like the synthetic left. But continue, Rachel.
That whole line of argument, that whole form of insidious messaging,
which fascists never use,
depends on there being an other, right? Some sort of very powerful cabal that's secretly in charge and pulling all the strings, and they need to be rooted out.
So you hear that? So you're not allowed to believe that this country has a group of secret rulers. You can't say that Wall Street is pulling the strings and that big corporations and banks are pulling the strings, right? You can't say that the people with the money make the rules and the rich and powerful are running things behind the scenes. She just said that's fascist, right? That's fascist, apparently. If you talk about a secret cabal, if you talk about the Council on Foreign Relations, if you talk about the American Enterprise Institute, if you talk about Wall Street and the big oil monopolies and the Silicon Valley fascists, if you talk about any of that, you're a fascist. You're anti-Semitic, right? I mean, she just said that if you believe that there's some powerful group pulling the strings, you're a fascist. Well, I mean, a lot of people think that, and a lot of people realize that to be the case, that he who has the gold makes the rules, and that we are ruled by the billionaire monopolies, the big banks and the corporations that run the world. And believing that is not called fascism. That's just called basic anti-capitalism. However, there is a big attempt on the part of the political establishment to declare all anti-capitalism to be anti-Semitic. Jonah Goldberg, the editor of National Review magazine, he wrote an article, you can look this up, called Karl Marx's Jew-Hating Conspiracy Theory. And he argues that all criticism of capitalism is anti-Semitic because rich is code for Jew. That is what Jonah Goldberg argues. That's where this is going. And they said it against Jeremy Corbyn. There were Labor Party folks in the Labor Party that were against Jeremy Corbyn, and they said this too. They said, well, we all know that anti-capitalism is just coded hatred for Jews. Anti-capitalism is just anti-Semitism. That's where they're headed with this. If you criticize capitalism in any way, somehow that's declared to be covert anti-Semitism, even though Karl Marx himself was Jewish, even though the main argument that actual Nazis and fascists make is they believe Marxism and socialism and communism are Jewish conspiracies or foreign conspiracies that they're going to root out with their fascism. Actual fascists hate communism and hate Marxism with every ounce of their souls. Actual fascists tend to support imperialism and want to restore the greatness of colonialism. Mussolini colonized Libya, colonized Ethiopia. Germany wanted to retake the colonies that were stripped away after World War I. That's what the Nazis were all about, was trying to retake the colonies they'd lost in World War I. That actual fascists love imperialism. Actual fascists hate communism. Actual fascists are big supporters of the big banks and corporations. You know, the Nazis did business with Henry Ford and had all kinds of, wealthy capitalists tied in with them. You know, many corporations were involved. You can read the book IBM and the Holocaust. But oh no, if you think there's a shadowy elite, if you think there's a group of rich people that have power in the United States, if you think that, then you're a fascist. And if you think that the political establishment is controlled by rich and powerful forces, then you are a fascist. I mean, this is where it's going. Any criticism of the status quo is essentially fascism, as far as they're concerned.
Again and again and again, over time and in lots of different countries, but including in ours, that is core to fascist and authoritarian messaging. And Jewish people are perennially targeted, scapegoated, and insinuated against by people who are making those kinds of arguments. It happens over and over again around the world and in our history too, even though we don't often like to remember it happening here. We like to look back at the late 30s and the 40s and remember that we were the country that joined the fight against Hitler and stopped what he was doing. Right? That's true.
And you know why? Because of this organization that was funded by Russia called the Communist Party that aligned with a president, Roosevelt, who packed the Supreme Court in order to get what he wanted and supported illegal protests by workers seizing their factories and regulated Wall Street and, spent government money to hire the unemployed to build infrastructure. And said that Stalin was a person that he liked. That's why. It's because of this malign foreign influence, this subversive foreign element called communism that built the labor unions, that aligned with Roosevelt against Henry Ford, against Henry Morgan, against the big corporations and banks. It's because of them that the United States was on the side of the people of the Soviet Union against the Nazis. It's because of them that the United States was in the Democratic alliance against the fascists, right? So she's on here every night whipping up Russophobia, anti-Russian hysteria, anti-communism, hostility to Russia, hostility to China, when she ignores the fact that that the reason, one of the major reasons the United States was on the right side of World War II was because of a pro-Russian, pro-Soviet organization that supported Stalin. They got money from the Soviet Union called the Communist Party. But let's not get into, historic important details while she lectures us on the history of fascism.
Also, there's this truth is stranger than fiction, dark history of the forces in our country who wanted us either not to fight Germany, or if we were going to fight, they wanted us to fight on Hitler's side. This is all imagery from the United States that we're showing here on the screen right now.
Yeah. And I wonder what those people thought about Ukraine. I wonder about, what side the Ukrainians who fled to the United States during the 1930s, what side would they have been on in this little disagreement, Rachel? And while we're at it, what were all these fascists during the 1930s, like William Dudley Pelley and Father Coughlin, what were they always ranting against? Against communism and foreign conspiracy and Moscow. The American Liberty League was a group of Democrats who quit supporting Roosevelt because he was friendly to the Soviet Union. And what did Al Smith say at the founding convention of the American Liberty League? He said, America can have only one capital, Washington or Moscow, right? The fascists and Nazis of the World War II and pre-World War II years were the Rachel Maddows of the day. They were preaching Russophobia, preaching anti-communism, calling Roosevelt a dictator, calling Roosevelt a tyrant and a strong man, saying that he had come to power because of meddling and foreign influence from Russia, saying that his attempts to use the Supreme Court to support his economic measures were a threat to the republic, a threat to democracy. The people supporting Hitler in the 1930s in America, Rachel Maddow, were just like you. They sounded just like you. They were preaching Russophobia. They were preaching a call for dissent to be outlawed. They called the labor movement violent thugs who were, violently threatening the private property rights of small businesses. Rachel Maddow, if you open a history book and read what Charles Coughlin or the America First Committee or the Silver Legion of America were saying it, they sounded just like you. All righty. But let's continue with our history lesson from Rachel Maddow.
There were powerful, well-connected, and indeed well-armed forces in the United States in the lead up to World War II who wanted us fighting on Hitler's side.
Wait a second. There were powerful and well-connected forces. Were they a cabal? Were they a cabal, Rachel? Were they a cabal? There was a sinister group of people that wanted us to align with Hitler. And were they pulling strings behind the scenes? Were they like a shadowy elite that was controlling the political process? Oh my God, Rachel Maddow is a Nazi, according to the definition of Nazi that she used 5 minutes earlier in her broadcast. But let's continue.
Because of what Hitler was saying about Jewish people and what he was doing to Jewish people. We had
Actually, if you read Elizabeth Dilling, one of the main promoters of Nazism in the United States, Elizabeth Dilling, the reason that she was sympathetic to the Nazis wasn't because of what they were saying about Jewish people. It was because of what they were saying about communists. And if you listen to the National Association of Manufacturers and the American Legion, they actually really liked Hitler because he was killing all the communists. And Hitler then said communism was a Jewish conspiracy. But their main argument in favor and support of Hitler was that Hitler was killing all the commies. He was getting rid of those pesky labor unions that were always leading strikes. He was bringing order to the country and nullifying the threat of communist revolution. He was, he was kind of like you, Rachel. He was whipping up hysteria about the fear of foreign influence and Russia and the need to shut down dissent and silence critics who were speaking up and spreading disinformation and propaganda from the Reds. But let's continue, Rachel. Continue to lecture us about fascism.
Ultra-right movement here in America that sided with that 85 years ago. And the fight against them back then.
Like, she looks shocked, too. Like, are you really shocked that in the United States of America, the center of Western capitalism, the homeland of American imperialism, there would be people that supported a violent anti-communist movement in Germany? Like, why is that like shocking to her? Like, there was people here 85 years ago. Oh my God, good America had fascists. Of course America had fascists in it. Of course. And in fact, the Nazis got a lot of their eugenics laws from the United States. In Mein Kampf, Hitler actually praises the eugenics laws in the United States. And you can go down the line, long before Hitler came to power, Woodrow Wilson worked with Hollywood and G.W. Griffith to make a propaganda film glorifying the Ku Klux Klan called The Birth of a Nation. And if you watch that film, it doesn't say white people in the film. What's the word in A Birth of a Nation or The Birth of a Nation? What's the word that they use in that film for white people? They call them Aryans. Aryans. And, the Ku Klux Klan was a mass fascist movement in the United States, that really started after the Civil War, but was revived in 1914. That was decades before the Nazi Party, was a big deal in Germany. There was fascism in the United States and fascist elements and extremists and violent far-right anti-communists and anti-Semites and racists. There was that in America. Why is she shocked by this? She's just so shocked that there were people in America who supported Hitler. Of course there were people in America who supported Hitler. And IBM supported Hitler, and Coca-Cola, the reason there's Fanta Orange is they wanted to have the Nazi drink. They didn't want to have the Nazis drinking Coke, but they wanted to make money from bottling soda in Nazi Germany. Hugo Boss was making the Nazi uniforms. It was many big corporations, L'Oreal from France, many big corporations were in bed with the Nazis, Rachel. That's not shocking because fascism is about saving capitalism, is an attempt to save capitalism by crushing the labor movement, crushing the unions, and degrowth. So why is she shocked by this?
I think is fascinating, and that's what I've been working on with this podcast. I think that there's a lot for us to learn from the Americans who went before us who had to fight against that.
Well, a lot of them were communists, Rachel. The main fighters against Hitler in the United States, they were communists. And in fact, during the McCarthy period, one of the categories they had for people that shouldn't be trusted. They had communists, that was members of the party. They had fellow travelers, people that weren't members of the party but were considered aligned with the communists. They had another category during McCarthyism for people that shouldn't be trusted. You know what it was? It was premature anti-fascists. Premature anti-fascists. If you were anti-fascist before World War II started, that meant you were probably a communist. You were a premature anti-fascist. That was actually a category the McCarthyists used, right? It was considered to be a category of subversive, a premature anti-fascist. So there you go, Rachel. Premature anti-fascists. So all these people that you're talking about who were fighting against fascism, a lot of them were communists, and they admired Stalin, and they admired the Soviet Union, and they were supporting the effort to defeat fascism on the part of the communists. They were part of the Communist International. But let's go on, Rachel. Please continue telling us.
But if you study this stuff in history, right? I mean, it's almost unbelievable that it happened at all when it happened. But then when you're in the middle of studying that history, you have news cycles like the one we're in right now.
Why is it unbelievable that there would be pro-Nazi people in America? Why is that unbelievable? I mean, the United States has supported every authoritarian fascist government around the world. They supported Pinochet. They supported Pol Pot in Cambodia because he was against the Soviet Union. They supported all kinds of military juntas. They supported Rios Montt in Guatemala, who committed genocide against the native people. I mean, all kinds of brutal authoritarian regimes that killed communists were supported by America simply because they killed communists. So why is she shocked, just shocked, that the United States would have admirers and supporters of Hitler in it? Like, what planet is she living on?
And it feels all the more impossible that this is what's happening right now. I mean, in our current news cycle right now, you've got the immediate former president of the United States putting out a statement on social media.
How is it happening now? This is great. Please continue, Rachel.
That's some kind of ominous, vague warning for Americans who are Jewish, saying Jews need to be more appreciative of him. Jews need to, quote, get their act together. He says, quote, before it's too late.
Yeah, well, read that tweet. Read that tweet. It's very clear. Donald Trump is saying to Israel, look who your real friend is. Donald Trump is bragging that he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Donald Trump is warning about the danger of Muslims around the world. Donald Trump was a huge panderer to Netanyahu and the Israeli far right wing. He was completely pandering to the Israeli far right wing. And if you read the text of that tweet, read the tweet on the screen.
Nobody knows what he's talking about.
Read the tweet on the screen. He's saying basically that in order to be safe from anti-Israel and anti-Semitism, Jews need to rally behind him. That's what Donald Trump is saying because he was a very pro-Israel president. That's what he was saying. The notion that this tweet from Donald Trump is threatening another Holocaust is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Donald Trump was a blatantly pro-Israel president, pro-Netanyahu. This tweet is not threatening another Holocaust. It's saying that Jewish folks need to rally behind him so he can protect them because he was really pro-Israel and really anti-Islamic and really anti-Iran. That's what this tweet is very clearly saying. I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump, and especially not on this front. Donald Trump was an awful president. And one of the reasons I disagree with Donald Trump is because he was such a blind supporter of Israel. And he did leaps and backflips to please Israel. So this notion that Donald Trump is calling for another Holocaust or he's anti-Semitic because of that tweet is just ridiculous. I mean, it's just utterly ridiculous. Read the tweet. It doesn't say that. Donald Trump was the most pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, anti-Iran, anti-Islamic president ever. Netanyahu loved Donald Trump. I mean, give me a break, Rachel. Give me a break.
Or what he's threatening American Jews with here, but
you think we're stupid?
This is really happening now.
Come on.
We're 3 weeks out from the next election after the last one, when he sent an armed mob of his supporters to try to violently overthrow the government.
Yeah. Buffalo, that guy with the buffalo horns on his head and a couple Proud Boys who ran around and farted in Nancy Pelosi's chair. Yeah, they were going to violently overthrow the government. Yeah. I think in order to violently overthrow the U.S. government, you need like an army, you need the military. In order to overthrow the government, I think you need more than a mob of rednecks running through the Capitol. But continue.
The transfer of power and make him leader by force of arms. Last week, the Republican Party.
Force of arms. Make him leader by force of arms. You know, do you really think that that largely unarmed crowd was going to defeat the U.S. Army? Seriously? Seriously. I mean, again, do they think we're stupid? Yes, they do. All righty.
This on social media. Kanye, Elon, Trump. The latter, of course, is the guy who just posted the Jews better get their act together message. The former is the guy who just posted that while he was sleepy right this second, as soon as he woke up, he was going to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. The middle guy in that triad is the one who has reportedly been in direct contact with the fascist dictator in Russia who's currently waging war on Ukraine.
Hold up. I'm really lost here, Rachel. All right. So Donald Trump, former president of the United States, who was super pro-Israel, whose daughter has converted to Judaism, right? And is an Orthodox Jew, who moved the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That's the first one. That's Trump. The last one is Kanye West, a rapper who's made some anti-Semitic tweets and stuff like that. And the middle one is Elon Musk, who says nothing about Jews, but he's friendly with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, who's currently waging a war against a group of Nazis, against people that are tearing down World War II memorials, against people that are honoring Nazi collaborators. A leader who is constantly talking about how great the victory over fascism was. You really lost me there, right? Anti-Semitic African-American rapper or rapper who made anti-Semitic tweets. Former president who was super pro-Israel, has a Jewish daughter, and was just pandering endlessly to Israel and Netanyahu. And Elon Musk, who has made statements about maybe negotiating with Russia, that's currently playing up the glory of the Soviet Union and their proud anti-fascist heritage as they battle Nazis. I don't know what the Republican Party meant by those tweets, but if you think that tweet somehow means kill all Jews, you're insane.
He's the guy who's recently been promoting an appeasement plan to get Western countries to back off and just let the Russian dictator keep whatever parts of other countries he wants to invade and occupy, and we should leave him alone to do it.
Well, actually, no. Russia facilitated this thing called the Minsk Agreement. They tried their hardest to get Ukraine to just recognize the rights of the people in the eastern regions. They bent over backwards to avoid recognizing the republics. And then after 8 years of waiting, after a food blockade, after drone strikes, after the government in Kiev threatened to get nuclear weapons, then Russia moved in to protect the people that speak Russian in the eastern regions from 8 years of bombardment. Russia's taken in millions of refugees from the Donbass regions. She doesn't know what she's talking about there. She's, and now Elon Musk wanting to negotiate an end to this war is somehow proof that he wants to kill all Jews or something. This is like there's nothing logically coherent about anything that she is saying. Has she said one true thing since the beginning of this segment? Like one true thing. I'm waiting for one true thing from the beginning of this segment to the, fascists want to burn the country down and burn the whole country down because it's irredeemable and start from the beginning with them in charge, to, Donald Trump is anti-Semitic because he's saying that he's the real supporter of Jewish people and they should support him, to Elon Musk is somehow a fascist because he wants to negotiate with Russia, which is fighting fascism. She hasn't said any true things throughout any of this segment.
So the House Republican tweet naming those three guys as the holy trinity of the Republican Party right now. Kanye, Elon, Trump, that's still up.
Yeah, and none of those people have anything to do with the point of your story here.
The before it's too late threat that the Jews need to get their act together.
So Donald Trump can protect them. That's the point of his tweet. And that was the point of his presidency. He was endlessly pandering to Israel.
The going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people threat.
From a rapper from an African-American rapper. I really doubt he's a white nationalist, despite, the problematic things he said and the offensive things he said about Jewish people. I really doubt that Kanye West is a white nationalist.
And also with the guy in touch with Putin, trying to get everybody else to back off and let him invade who he wants.
And what does Putin have to do with any of this? Because Putin's fighting against Nazis in Ukraine, defending World War II memorials, glorifying and playing up the history of the Soviet Union, liberating Jews from concentration camps. I mean, this has absolutely, there's not a single coherent thread here.
That's still up from an official Republican Party Twitter account. And all of this it is a good reminder that anti-Semitism and authoritarianism very, very, very often go together.
Wait, what? What? Huh?
It is also a reminder that neither of these things are fights that are consigned to history. I mean, our generation gets our turn in the barrel with these things now.
It's like this started out as her like giving us a confused lecture on the history of fascism, and it just turned into like a schizophrenic rant. She's connecting things that are in no way connected. She's pointing to tweets that don't say what they actually say. She's linking Russia to things that have nothing to do with Russia. I mean, this is just incoherent. I mean, this is worse than bad analysis. Like Kanye West, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump have nothing to do with each other. I mean, they have nothing to do with each other. And she's trying to tie them all together in this elaborate global conspiracy in which there's a secret Nazi cabal that's like pulling the strings to kill all the Jews or something. But then she started out the program by saying that if you think that there is a secret cabal pulling the strings, that you're a fascist. This doesn't even make any sense.